Welcome to the Iowa blog. I'm your host, Craig Wynn. This will be Qatsyr Harvest, Episode 5, as we continue to evaluate what Yahweh prescribed as his intent for the Shavua Qatsyr. We read right from the heart of the Torah. All of these things will exist. And if you recall, we went through the menu of items that Yahweh wanted presented, and which, of course, began with the 2 loaves of bread and was followed by the realization that this day would be fulfilled by a bull, and that there would also be a couple of lambs essential to this process, and a goat or 2. So they will exist as a means to become acceptable and to ascend to Yahweh, Olah. Now, Olah is one of those interesting terms that is almost universally misrepresented in English Bible translations. It is based upon the verb Allah. Now, Allah is written with the Ain, not the Aleph. It has nothing to do with the demonic god of Islam, but instead is a verb which means to ascend. It can be rendered to become acceptable. It can be rendered as to rise, but that's the basic meaning of the word. And so anything that is derived from it would have to carry that connotation. It is instead rendered as a burnt offering in almost all Bible translations. Well, the problem with that is that fire is ish, and there's no ish as part of olam, so there's nothing to be burnt. And offering, minka would be probably the most common term just for a simple offering. It's not represented in the word either. It's actually spelled identically to the verb meaning to rise. So I've rendered it as such. This is my mindset as I go through everything that Yahweh communicated, rather than just have a knee-jerk reaction as everyone else has done and fall in line with the religious publishers and replicate things that don't have any semblance of authenticity to them, like burnt offering in this case. I'll always search the verbal root if there is one, which there usually is. And this one is identical, so it's easy to identify. Or I will look at just what the letters stripped of their diacritical markings mean and how those letters form other words that are similar to it. So they will exist as Haya, the basis, by the way, of Yahweh's name, to be, was, is, and will always be, exists as a means to become acceptable and ascend. La is the preposition. It means to move towards, according to, approaching. Yahweh. Yahweh is God's one and only name. It is transliterated based upon his Torah instructions. Torah derives the O sound from the Hebrew Wa. And of course, it has the concluding Ah sound. Although the Ah sound, while reinforcing how to pronounce Yahweh's name, you find the other 3 letters, other than the Wa and Haya, the very verb that Yahweh told Moshe, served as the basis of his name, because it is Hey, Yod, Hey, and it's Haya. No one disputes its pronunciation, and no one disputes the pronunciation of Torah, with the Wa producing the O sound. So there can be no legitimate argument, no reasoned argument based upon Yahweh's Torah instructions regarding the Haya existence of his name, his Shem, that it is pronounced Yahweh. There is another, of course, exceedingly common word with a long history of its proper pronunciation, shared amongst Jews worldwide, that also conveys the sound of the Wa. You've probably heard Jews say, Shalom. I use it all the time. It is thought to mean peace. It only means peace in the sense of a derivative meaning. It means to reconcile a relationship, and when relationships are reconciled, they are peaceful. But the shalom, the word shalom, derives the O sound from the Hebrew vowel wa. Mystery solved. This is not complicated in terms of the proper pronunciation of Yahweh. Their gift. So this is a mincha, their special offering, their present bestowed without compensation. Mincha is the word that I shared earlier, would have been the proper term to use if Yahweh was speaking, trying to use Olah to speak of an offering. That would be mincha. He's distinguished it here, and you can see they share and hear that they share nothing in common, Olah and mincha. Other than the hey at the end of it, but in the case of the vowel, it does not, or verb, it does not indicate gender, and a noun, it would indicate gender. Gender, though, we shouldn't get too carried away in Hebrew. It's like most languages that have a male and female form on many nouns. They are helpful in that when you're using pronouns, you know if it is who, she, and he, him, or her would be acknowledging, because you can go back to the next or previous noun and see if it is feminine or masculine. So they have value, and sometimes the masculine and feminine traits of these words convey subtle messages to us, but not always. And you can read too much into it at times. But anyway, their gift, this offering that is a gift, is poured out on their behalf. It's nasak, offered freely by, and in this particular case, there was likely an association with the feminine mikah, because this is the word that follows that. I'm the first to render it this way, and I'll share my thinking with you. Feminine manifestation of the fiery light, Isha or Isha, whether it's vocalized one way or another with the eh ending or the ah ending. It is either speaks of a fiery light. Ish and Isha are written the same way. The Ish and Isha, the masculine and feminine forms of fire. Yahweh, since he is primarily masculine, appeared as Ish, as a fiery light to Moshe, and he accompanied the children of Israel throughout the Exodus as a fiery light, an Ish. But Isha is also a Hebrew word for fire. It has the ah ending, which makes a noun feminine. And so it's written the same way, but with the ah ending. So it would be the feminine manifestation of fire. The other meaning of Ishe would be female. Ishe is the feminine version of Ish. Ish means man or male individual, and Isha means female or woman. So this is a very interesting term, because the gift is poured out on their behalf by the Isha, and I have rendered it as feminine manifestation of the fiery light. And that is the most accurate, direct, literal deduction that can be drawn from the word. A uniquely welcoming and pleasing, and you can say spirit or indication. It's riach, slightly different than ruach, but shares much in common with it in terms of the beginning letter and the concluding letter. Ruach would be spirit or wind in Hebrew, and reach speaks of being accepted. I think it is likely that it is related to ruach, with the yod replacing the wa, and so it could well represent that you are being settled and becoming welcomed, if you will, by the feminine manifestation of Yahweh's character. He has conveys both masculine and feminine characteristics. As we shared on our last program, Yahweh's masculine characteristics, even when projected through the Ruach, are about 90% masculine, and his feminine attributes, nurturing, mothering, sheltering, comforting, those sorts of things, represent about 10% of the functions and attributes, if you will, of the Ruach. So the Ruach is certainly more masculine than feminine in terms of the way that Yahweh deploys it. And well, Yahweh made it very clear that he has both masculine and feminine characteristics, which is what you would expect of our Creator. And it is consistent with his creation. My wife has many characteristics that would be common among men, even though she is, and I can vouch for this, holy woman. In my case, I would be resolutely masculine in my approach to all things, except there are tender-hearted moments where maybe a little bit of femininity crawls into the process, and I think we're all that way. We have a little bit of both. One of the great examples of exuding both sides of this equation to a maximum extent would be Dode. Dode was at times driven by his emotions, and at times he was supremely logical. And so he is the extreme of both sides of this masculine and feminine. He obviously loved women. He had 8 wives and 10 other lovers that we know of that he kept just for that purpose, and yet his first love was a man. Dode is the robust example of what it means to think both with the head and feel with the heart. I tend to be far more on the masculine side of that equation, and I'm motivated by reason and far less by emotion. Both have their place, but this is all to share that that we have to kind of keep things in balance as we recognize that Yahweh will present himself, and every time that his name is used, if it's Yahweh as the subject of a verb, the verb is always masculine singular. It is never feminine. If Yahweh's name is used, it is always masculine singular. If it's just God being designated as an individual, it's always with the male pronoun, never with the feminine pronoun. So a little restraint here as we frame this issue is important. So the gift is poured out on their behalf by the feminine manifestation of the fiery light, a uniquely welcoming and pleasing spirit, reconciling the relationship. This is Nakoach, appeasing and soothing, unifying and integrated by advancing peace and harmony. It's from the previously stated Nuach. And then it is to approach again, La, to draw near Yahweh. Again, a transliteration of Yahweh's name. He is our Eloah. Eloah is the basis of both El and Elohim. And again, it's the Wah that designates the O sound. And this is how he directed us and instructed us pronounce his name in his Torah regarding his Haya existence. This is Kara, called out Leviticus 23:8. I know I've got into a lot of details here. Sometimes it's hard to keep track of what the point was when I offer so much information regarding each word, but I've been doing this now for 23 years, and it is the style that I have used throughout, and I have found that it is the best way to educate readers and listeners such that you also form a firm foundation of knowledge, and that with this additional information, you can make the connections between all of these thoughts to understand. And then based upon understanding, you can respond appropriately and even take the next step, which is to reach out to others and to join us as we endeavor to call Yisrael home. So I'm a firm believer that the more you understand the details that comprise the picture that Yahweh is painting with these words, the better and the clearer this picture will appear to you. And I think, too, by reinforcing these details, by looking at these words from very many different angles, you're likely not only to remember the words, but to remember the thoughts that are being conveyed. It's about 5 seconds time that our human brains make the transition from short-term to long-term memory, where you can recall and use something that you've heard for the rest of your life. And the transition is made either through repetition, which is what I'm doing here, or also by drawing vivid word pictures, which is part of what I'm doing as well. And these are techniques that help us such that we solidify our foundation of knowledge. And this is really important. And I keep on saying everything is really important, but maybe it all is really important. You're aware that there is a breakoff group that is using my amplified translation style and corrupting Yahweh's name and presenting God as Spirit Mom. And all of these people had been around my books and my shows for years, some of them 15 years, and yet they were easily seduced away for a single reason. Their actual foundation of knowledge was not significant enough to preclude their departure. And they weren't disciplined enough in rational thought and logic to be able to recognize when they're being deceived. So I don't want that to happen to you. I want you to have the basis of knowledge that you need to be rock solid in your relationship with Yahweh, and such that no matter which way the wind should blow, you will never lose your footing. They will exist as a means to become acceptable and to ascend to Yahweh. Their gift is poured out on their behalf by the feminine manifestation of the fiery light, a uniquely welcome and pleasing spirit, reconciling the relationship to approach Yahweh. Now, keep in mind, what is it that was being offered? What is this gift? You. I'm the first item listed as in the list of gifts, the bull, the par. And so I'm offering my life to not only sustain the lives of the mortal remnant of Yisrael, but also so that you're in a position where you can approach God. You have Dode represented by the AL, the Lamb. He is the Lamb of God who fulfilled Pesach and then Matzah B'Kodim to open the door to life, to perfect us by removing our guilt and then signing our adoption papers into the covenant family. He is the reason that we can participate in the Shavua harvest, which is being coordinated by a very productive bull called a parah in that particular case. Myself again, serving Dode's interest. And the third is perhaps the greatest orator of all time. The man who has orchestrated exactly what will transpire now 8.5 years from now. The man who who 40 Yobel, 888 years prior to that, orchestrated the Great Debate. Debate's probably the wrong term, but debate between the political and religious establishment of Israel. A debate would be they present their arguments, and then he refutes their arguments, and they go back and forth and do that sort of thing. It was a complete one-sided roast. Shit. Literal roast is what happened. Although the MC is like today's roasties, exceedingly funny. Well, Elia represents the goat. And so now that you know that it's the bull, the goat, and the lamb that are the very ingredients here that are presented as the gift, the beings to become acceptable and to ascend to Yahweh. Their gift is on their behalf. They're offering it freely on their behalf, and they're going to do it by the feminine manifestation of the fiery light. Now, you might say, well, how would the fiery light apply to all three of them? Well, with Dode, he served as the Pesach El. And after his body was beaten to a pulp by the Romans and his soul separated from his body, it was the fiery light of God that incinerated the Bashar in keeping with the Torah's instructions. The remains of the Passover lamb are always to be incinerated. And Dode was welcomed back into his father's presence with his soul likely enveloped in the fiery light of Yahweh's Ruach. So Dode gets it coming and going. So no question there. As for moi, well, I am part of the ultimate roast, if you will. Once my body is bludgeoned by Hasatan's corporeal manifestation, and his minions, whether they be progressives or Muslims, it is Yahweh who will ignite the flames, and my ashes mixed with water are going to be what cleanses Yisrael. It is going to be the most amazing funeral pyre ever witnessed in the history of the world, with Elia, of course, serving as the master of ceremonies. And it is just prior to that, the prior evening, that I'll be orchestrating literally a stream of light going from earth to heaven as part of the final gleaning on Teruah. So I also get it coming and going. As for Elia serving in this role, Elia is different than the other two. Elia is not actually sacrificing his life as part of a Moed Mikre. Dode did, I will. But he is there to make an enormous contribution to this process. And Elia, we've talked, 40 Yobel, 888 years ago, was brought up from earth to be with Yahweh, and likely would have appeared as light during part of that ascension process. And he will be the most illuminating of all prophets for the remnant of Yisrael when he returns as one of the two final witnesses. And this ceremony that he will be orchestrating, like the previous one, will be best known, be most magnificent for this manifestation of fiery light at God's doing when he confronted the religious and political establishment of Yisrael. God ignited the fire with the Adamah Parah, the red heifer, on Teruah in 2033, 6,000 Yah. He is also going to be witnessing and speaking about God's manifestation of this massive fiery light, flames leaping up to the heavens. And when Yahweh returns with Dode, we're told Dode's going to be as brilliant as the sun. He is going to be standing beside Dode offering his assistance as the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant is anointed. And so I think even Elia gets it coming and going. Well, this is a uniquely welcoming event, a pleasing event to Yahweh. It is the opportunity for acceptance because the relationship must be reconciled for anyone else to approach Yahweh. So this is a very powerful instruction that we gain considerable understanding by understanding who the players are. So we have heard Yahweh delineate the menu for the feast embodying the promise of 7. Along the way, God described the benefits afforded to those who choose to embrace what he is offering. This pleasing and welcoming gift is poured out upon us by an accepting spirit. So this is the embrace of the Spirit of God, thereby helping to reconcile the relationship. Now, if you harbored any doubts that these invitations to be called out and meet were descriptive of life within the covenant, or if they encapsulate God's mercy leading to vindication, well, these questions should have evaporated. Contrary to theological explanations, the Torah does not portray a legalized works-based path to God. Mercy leading to our reconciliation lies at the core of the Mikra, which in turn form the heart of the Torah. And throughout we find Yahweh and his chosen implements making the sacrifices to make Yisrael whole. Now, digging even deeper into the terminology, we find that the primary meaning of Nikokach is Nychowach. So Nach Ochach is, you don't like my pronunciation, you probably wouldn't have liked Moshe either. We don't know about Dodod's diction, but that is not something that is a concern to Yahweh. So if it bothers you, maybe you wouldn't have enjoyed being in their company either. So it is a conciliation which reconciles parties engaged in the relationship. Nekoach is from nuach, meaning that which brings rest and allows us to settle and remain. And that is the entire purpose of all of this. Yahweh wants us to settle down in Eden with him and remain for a very long time. He is calling us home to be with him. And in particular, he's calling Yisrael home, his estranged children, his wayward children, back home after a long, long time of being lost and wandering about apart from him. So this is a place of tranquility. It is speaking of both Eden on earth and of Shamaim in heaven. And upon our arrival, it was predicated upon embracing the Riach, which is the pleasing spirit of Yahweh. Now, here it's interesting, of course, this is why I mentioned that we can get carried away with feminine and masculine nouns. The Minka, which is feminine, and the fiery light of Yahweh is feminine, but all three of the individuals being offered for the benefit of Yisrael are bin. So the Hebrew word Isha Ishe is one of my, I think one of the most intriguing in the language because it has so many different potential connotations. And depending on how the letters are vocalized, because they're written the same way, it can be either, as I've shared, feminine manifestation of light, or it could be a fiery blaze, which obviously would purify and elevate. The word conveys woman and female. And because of my exuberance to kind kind of, I think, overappreciate, overemphasize. I'll admit that I overemphasized the nature of ruach being a feminine noun. Um, I would have written, and I did write some time ago, that Isha conveys not just only woman, female, and fire, but also mother. And that's really not true. If God wanted us to approach a spiritual mother, he would use M. Ab and M, both with the Aleph, are the Hebrew words for mother and father. He didn't use either of them. He didn't use a word that even was remotely related to either of them. And so it would be appropriate to say that this is a feminine manifestation of fire. We don't even think in English about fire being masculine or feminine. So it's either a fire or female. And feminine manifestation of fire is the best way to blend those two things together. Now, as we will discover when we approach Teruah and future programs, and again during our assessment of Yom Kippurim, which will be, and that's a whole nother volume that we'll engage in down the road. Religious institutions almost always render Isha as this finishing the thought on Olah Isha as a burnt offering or as an offering made by fire. And I expect they do so because it is indistinguishable in the text from the feminine noun for fire, Isha. However, as stated previously, there is no reference to offering or made in the word's etymology. These meanings and roots acknowledge neither feminine fire nor woman and wife make any sense as the primary definition within the context of this passage or any other where this is used, and it's used throughout the Moed Mikre. Throughout the Torah, Ish fire is used as a symbol of Yahweh's presence and especially of his light. Ish serves as a metaphor for judgment, for burning off impurities, and for purification. It is also a source of light and enlightenment, of warmth and comfort. Fire is something that elevates and uplifts. It's a reference to the primary direction that a fire's smoke and heat travel. In addition, and most importantly, fire transforms dying and decaying organic matter into light energy, which is consistent with the purpose of the Mikre, particularly Bikurim and Shabua, where we are told that we are empowered and enriched as we are transformed from material beings to energy-based beings akin to light. So while all of these are important reconciliation-related concepts, based upon the three letters found in the text, the word Yahweh selected could just as easily have been Isha, meaning female individual, wife or woman. This is also pertinent because the role of the Ruach Kodesh, set-apart spirit, providing benefits of the Moedim, the restoring testimony, is likely engaged and used by Yahweh to make the Bikurim transfer of Dod's nefesh soul from Sheol to Shamayim, hell to heaven, if you will, and also on Shabua to facilitate this river of light that will be leaving the planet of those who are covenant members at the commencement of the time of Yaakov's troubles. So it would be natural, but we're extrapolating, for Yahweh to deploy his Ruach to accomplish both missions. In that their alphabetic compositions are identical, there is no way to distinguish between Ishe, Isha, or Isha, and they're all written in Aleph, Shen, He in the original revelation. Rabbis called Masoretes would not assign their vowel-pointing devices to vocalize this text to fit their moods, and likings for more than 2,400 years after it was originally transcribed and spoken. Our oldest extant copy of such vocalizations, called the Masoretic text, dates to the 11th century CE. It would be the Leningradis Codex. And sadly, the more we study the word, the less we trust the rabbis' opinions. In this particular statement, the more traditional portrayal of Ishe is as a burnt offering, or more linguistically accurate and demonstrative connotation, an offering which separates and rises, which I suppose could be permissible, albeit these are not ideal choices, because offering and the other aspects of it, burnt, really aren't direct definitions of the term, no matter how it's vocalized. But these clearly are not ideal choices when the passage concludes with the pleasing spirit of reconciliation. That aside, since there is no reference to making an offering in the Hebrew word itself, and since we will soon discover that the definition of burnt offering becomes senseless in the presentation of the Mikra of Yom Kippurim, also described in the same section here of Kara Leviticus, we are compelled to consider other options. After all, it is God's custom that when there are many potential renderings of a term and multiple meanings could be intended, widening and deepening the instruction being offered. And I think such is the case here. And that's one of the advantages, by the way, of amplified translations, and of me putting what I think is the primary meaning of what is being conveyed in the bold text, and then within the parenthetical, after transliterating the term and the Hebrew term in italics, so that you can see it and look it up, define it for yourself, I continue with a list of other potential meanings, so that you have a fuller understanding of the full scope of a word's potential connotations. So there is often the context of the sentence that helps us define which meanings are most appropriate. In this context, the gift being provided by the manifestation of God's light is likely the Spirit offering purification and elevation. And at this point, that Spirit is, well, not identified as even the Ruach, certainly not identified as the Ruach Kodesh, certainly not identified as the Ruach Kodesh of Yahweh, not even called his Ruach, because there's no mention of Ruach. We are again extrapolating, and as we are all transformed, just as the fire does, taking rotten and decaying organic matter and transforming it into a form of energy, fiery light. This could be just the very nature of the process that Yahweh is offering and envisions and is communicating on all of our behalf. It could be the very way that we all go, that he makes possible for us to be enlightened, enriched, empowered, both here on Shavua and on Bikurim. So it could be just the natural process of Yahweh, who is spirit, who is transforming us into spirit-based beings, using fire as the proper metaphor for explaining exactly how this is going to happen with us, and has nothing to do with Yahweh's Ruach Kodesh, because clearly the Ruach Kodesh is not named nor directly associated with any of these instructions pursuant to the Moed Mikra. So as we have come to learn, there is an aspect of Yahweh's nature which transforms us, separating us in unto God. And this process is germane to the fulfillment of the Moed Mikre and to the promises of the covenant itself. And we extrapolate this often to the set-apart spirit, the Ruach, and I've written about that in this particular section of this book that I'm sharing with you on the Qatsyr harvest. But as I've shared on previous programs, there is no mention of the Ruach here. And so it is an extrapolation from feminine fire to Ruach, when if that were intended, it is likely that Yahweh would have used Ruach, and he didn't. And if he wanted to convey a maternal aspect of his nature, he would have used M, but he didn't. So in this regard, and even as the Choder is responsible for cultivating the harvest with the seeds both father and son have sown, I am the lone individual inspired, enlightened, enabled, and emboldened by the 7 Ruach spirits of Yahweh. And in the 11th chapter of Yeshaya, Isaiah, where this is described, there is no question. It's Ruach mentioned 7 times. So when he means to say Ruach, and when he means to say the Ruach of Yahweh, God's a very effective communicator. He does. Should anyone be troubled by Yahweh, by the way, having a feminine, perhaps even a maternal nature, in addition to his primary nature, which is both masculine and paternal, the covenant is a family. And in families, there are often, there are always children, and there is in the human experience a father and a mother. There is no reference ever to there being a mother of the covenant, however. So at best, we are projecting this feminine role onto the Bereth covenant. But it is, I think, comforting to think about. That's why I said on a program a couple of programs ago on this particular topic, is that should we go beyond some of the feminine aspects of the Ruach, which they say is about 10%, maybe 20% maximum of the Ruach's deployments are feminine versus masculine. And should we go beyond, the nurturing aspects and what we consider motherly aspects, all the way to a mother, and then a couple of things are essential. One is we know that there is no spiritual mom. There's no second person of a trinity, much less a dual nature of God. God is one. Yahweh is one. He is our father. He is not our mother. And so if you go to the point of distinguishing a second mother persona, which you have just stated is so far afield from what Yahweh conveys that you're off being on a religious tangent and grossly misleading anyone who believes you. So you cannot go there ever. You can reference maternal characteristics and be on reasonably solid ground with that extrapolation, but it is an extrapolation. But if you go to a mother as a unique persona who should be venerated and has a voice, what you're saying is exceedingly caustic to God's instructions and his intent, and it has no basis whatsoever in the Torah prophets. The second is, and I've hinted at this, if you go beyond saying what God says, that he has both a masculine and a feminine nature, and you extrapolate that beyond a feminine and masculine nature, like, for example, don't fully express both sides, uh, to a motherly nature, it is an extrapolation. Uh, I have said previously that I think that in the right context, properly constrained and framed, it is a harmless um, and actually good-natured extrapolation. It's something that makes us feel more comfortable, feel better as we approach God. We see ourselves more in a covenant family relationship under that basis. And under that basis, I think those connotations are likely intended. But you need to know that you have to be careful when you go there and recognize, like in my translations where I said the bold is what God said, and the inside the parenthetical and the commentary is all an expansion of that, an extrapolation of that, an explanation of and conclusions that can be drawn from that. You've moved into the world of extrapolation, even when you talk about maternal characteristics of the one God. And even then, God has but one name. He has one identity. He is one, and He is He. Now, reinforcing these thoughts and adding a layer of complexity into the whole thing, we do know that Ruach is feminine. And many of the responsibilities described within the Torah and prophets that are associated with the Spirit can be seen as maternal. Now, in my exuberance to help explain why Isha was in the text here and elsewhere in the Mikra, I will admit I was too exuberant in my extrapolations, and I have pulled back considerably from that position now that I've had the opportunity to reconcile this place where the only place that would tend to take you to a motherly notion, and that is in the second instruction that Yah inscribed on the second of two tablets, where he speaks of a respect for a father and mother, our father and mother, elongating our days on the Adamah, the earth. And long ago, I recognized that this could not be our earthly mother and father, as everyone else throughout time had supposed, because two statements earlier, I was making it really clear that no, fathers corrupt their children to the third and fourth generation. And he never spoke of a spiritual mother and didn't put spiritual mom or heavenly father in the text. But I knew for certain it wasn't our earthly mom and dad. And so the first response, some 20 years ago, uncorrected until recently, was that maybe it represents our Heavenly Father and spiritual mother. But it can't, because it pertains to prolonging our days on the Adamah, which is not only the earth, it's the very dust of the ground. It is man's world. And the only way that this happens for Yisrael is to have an appreciation for the covenant that Yahweh described between Abraham and Sarah. And Abraham clearly is delineated hundreds of times in the Torah, even throughout the prophets, as the ultimate father of the children of Yisrael. He is the father whom Yahweh made the promise to fulfill his agreement to ultimately reconcile his relationship with the descendants of Abraham. And since Abraham was not just a bit, but he was full rogue, and not in the good sense. Most lovable rogues have a good heart, and they mean well. They're usually reasonably adept and clever individuals that just occasionally trip over their own feet. Abraham did some really rotten stuff. and he was never particularly clever. But Sarah, she appears to be a sweetheart. She laughed at God, of course, but she appears to be a good cook. Yahweh loved the cheeseburgers that she served long ago. She when she gave Abraham guidance to distance himself from, set away the slave woman Hagar and Ishmael, and Abraham did not want to do it. Yahweh was very clear. Listen to your wife and do as she says. Therefore, we know that what Sarah says matters and that God agrees with her, particularly as it relates to the covenant. So it makes some sense, lots of sense actually, particularly in the use of Adamah on the earth and the recognition that Abraham is the father of Israel, and that Sarah is the woman of character in this story, that the father and mother are Abraham and Sarah. And once you come to that conclusion, there's no longer any impetus whatsoever to ascribe anything other than feminine and maternal characteristics to Yahweh's nature, even though they represent a tiny portion of who Yahweh actually is. So, as I've shared previously, the feminine aspect of God's nature is conveyed by the statement in the beginning, Bereshith, Genesis 1:27. So God created Adam, he created man in his image. So God, masculine, created man, masculine, in his masculine image, resemblance, pattern, and model. In the image of God, masculine, he, masculine, created him, masculine. Male, masculine, and female, feminine, he created them. I haven't looked up in a while to see if them was masculine or feminine. It would be, I guess it would be interesting. But what you have here is masculine, masculine, masculine. Masculine, 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 feminine, masculine, and masculine. So it is, what, 8 or 9 to 1? It's about the relationship that we see in Yahweh's nature, even with the Ruach. And maybe that is our answer. As I've said, the Ruach's deployment is about 80%, maybe 90% masculine. So is this statement. I know that some of these details may not be tremendously interesting to you, and they might not even have come up had it not been for the conspiracy cult of Mama God. But the conspiracy cult of Mama God is in our vicinity, and because they are passing off my work as theirs and corrupting it and attacking Yahweh's implement, it is obviously a topic of discussion. That is how Yahweh always responds to such things. I'm doing a whole series of translations now from the Torah as to what God's not only instructions were, but what God's own actions were as it related to these things. And he is consistent, and it isn't the least bit tolerant. It isn't the least bit acceptance. He never does walk away from a battle, and he does not conclude the battle until whoever it is that is viewed as corrupting is pulverized, destroyed, obliterated. So I'm gonna do what I've always done. I listen to Yahweh. I try to emulate his approach. This is his approach, and we will follow it. So before we leave these pronouncements in the 18th chapter of Korah, I should say the 18th pronouncement. This is the 18th verse in the 23rd chapter of Kara Leviticus. Let's review the entire statement with an eye to the rich symbolism pursuant to this glorious harvest of the covenant's children on Shavuot, particularly as it foreshadows what's going to occur on Teruah and then again on Kippurim at the commencement and then the conclusion of the time of Yisrael's troubles. It reads, "You should approach, coming closer, taking responsibility above and beyond the loaves of bread," 2 of them, representing Goyim and Yehudim, attacking the problem by dining with 7, conveying the promise of being perfected, becoming unblemished and innocent as children, by way of the lambs each year as the means to renewal, and 1 bull representing that which is both frustrating and divisive, but also that which is fruitful and productive. A young male. I wish I was a young male these days, but nonetheless, when you consider the alternative to growing older, I think I'm doing just fine. In the morning, to encourage being perceptive, contemplative, and discerning, seeking out and considering all of the available information and then responding appropriately. And 2 transformative rams, representing the upright pillar and the doorway, even the leader of the flock. They will exist as a means to become acceptable and to ascend to Yahweh. Their gift is offered freely and is poured out on their behalf by the feminine manifestation of the fiery light, a uniquely welcoming and pleasing spirit of acceptance, reconciling the relationship to approach Yahweh. That, my friends and family, is Shavuot. I thank you for listening. I look forward to our next episode with you as you return to my home and I come to visit you and yours here on the Yahweh blog. I am Craig Wynn.